Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Dion Leadership webinar series. Today, we are going to be talking about harnessing the power of collective wisdom, group coaching for leadership development. Today, I have with me Steve Dion, our founder and CEO, as well as Joe LeDuc, who is our VP of Coaching and Consulting Services.
Thanks, Lauren, and welcome everybody. I appreciate you taking some time out of your day. And Joe, thank you for just agreeing to lead our talk today. Before I turn it over to Joe, I wanted to do a couple of introductory slides and talk a little bit about kind of why we pick group coaching and what this looks like. So for those of you that don't know Dion Leadership, really all the work that we do is around trying to create organizations where employees start every day excited and end every day accomplished. So in that work that we do, we're forever looking at leadership development solutions, coaching and consulting solutions, and advanced kind of ways of doing work that create those conditions. And that led us to the work that we're talking about here today. So we're talking, these are sort of our 6 main service offerings. We do a lot of individual leadership coaching, but we also do leadership development programs and management training courses. So in that first rung of those top 3 things of that area of responsibility, we have found this idea of group coaching emerging. We also do, team development, talent assessment, OD things, but really today we're talking about that kind of top ribbon of work and activities. And just believe that group coaching is a new mode and method, and Joe's going to walk you through sort of what we've learned and why that is the case. And that work really comes from the types of clients that we work with. So our client base is pretty broad. We do a lot of individual leadership coaching with a lot of these companies, but we also run a lot of management development programs. And recently, many of these clients have said, group coaching might be another way to blend that work. So over the course of the last couple of years, we've kind of developed this point of view on what group coaching would look like. And I'm super excited to share the stage today with Joe LeDuc. Joe has been a coach and consultant for Dion Leadership for a few years, and just a few months ago agreed to take on an expanded role as our VP of Coaching and Consulting Services. So Joe's work and role is to work with clients like these in developing and crafting solutions. As a certified coach himself and somebody who's been in the classroom, though, he has firsthand knowledge going to talk about this work and what this looks like. We did a very similar presentation like this for HRCI as a HR governing body about 6 months ago or so. We wrote an ebook on the subject as well. So we thought we'd share it within our Dion Leadership community and walk you through a version of that. And then also at the end, be able to share with you an ebook that comes with this. So as I turn this over to Joe, I just wanted to also share administratively, for those of you that haven't been on one of our webinars, we will send out the link to this recording to you afterwards. So you will have a version of the slides. And then later on in our talk, we'll put in the chat the ebook that accompanies this work, and it's a lot of the same kind of content but positioned in an ebook format, and then it'll also be in the email that you get after this. So with that, I'll turn over to Joe.
Thank you, Steve. You're a gentleman as always. I appreciate such a warm invitation. It is a pleasure to be with all of you today. I'm very excited about today's webinar. I've been a coach for almost a decade now, and prior to that, I was an educator. So speaking to these topics is dealing with subject matter that's very near and dear to my heart and passion, right? So I'd like to open really by addressing why we're here today. What are we looking to do? What are we looking to accomplish? What are our objectives? So first and foremost, it's just to really kind of familiarize you with coaching, and then group coaching specifically, the different elements that it is comprised of. And then to kind of differentiate group coaching from, let's say, something like managerial or group training. Also to help you decide if you need a training or coaching approach to your leadership development program. I have a number of real life examples and proven results that I'd like to share with you today as well. We have the data to show that this actually works. And to really kind of present different elements of group coaching and when it's appropriate to use each. And to offer ways to combine group coaching and training, because sometimes they can work together. At the very least, my hope is that you walk away more informed. Whether this is something that you want to explore internally within your organization, whether this is the kind of thing you want to kind of knock on Dion's door and have a longer conversation about, or if you kind of decide, hey, this sounds like a fantastic idea, now's not a great time for it. Regardless, I just want you to walk away with data in hand. So whatever decision you make is coming from a more informed place as it relates to the topic of group coaching, right? So let us continue. And I think first and foremost, one of the things I already mentioned is how do we differentiate training from group coaching? Simply put, if we're talking about training, and I want to make it very clear too, I've worked as a trainer and a facilitator for years now. So getting into the nuance of how to differentiate these two entities is, I think, really important as we kind of plod further into this conversation. If we're talking about training, commonly we have a single kind of leader or facilitator at the top who is more or less a receptacle of knowledge. They are a reservoir of information that they are then transmitting to an audience. They could be teaching a model, a process, a system, a design of sorts, but it starts with them and then works its way into the learners. Group coaching is more of an exploratory process. You don't necessarily have that facilitator at the top where the information is then kind of trickling down to the learner group. You have a master coach who is there and who is present, but they operate more like a signpost, a navigator at times to help guide the conversation if need be. Group coaching is very much anchored in the experience that all of the participants already possess. And if we're talking about coaching, even if we were going to differentiate it, let's say from something like consulting, as a consultant, I may come in and provide you with a list of solutions or answers, if you will. If we're talking about coaching, it very much works from the premise that the individual or group already has the answers or solutions. I, as a coach, through things like active listening and powerful questioning, help the group or help the individual unpack all of the different layers that kind of add up and compound and kind of cause a dissonance, if you will, from letting that person really identify with the answer that already exists. All right. And I want to be very clear that in today's webinar, we're not necessarily prioritizing one over the other or to say that one is better than the other. They both have their place. I am here to just kind of illuminate some of the different differences and commonalities between them so that when you go and you're thinking about, okay, we have this group that we really want to, develop, what would be the best fit? Okay, let us keep going. So if we're talking about both training and group coaching, there is a cognitive behavioral model here that I think is important to address, if but for a moment. And my emphasis will be placed more on the group coaching side. If we're talking about a cognitive behavioral approach within a coaching space, it looks a little bit like the formula you see at the top. So I'll work through an example. Let's say you're in a group coaching group, a pod of 3 or 4 individuals. I may come into the session with a situation. I will come into that session with an agenda already in mind, okay? And what is very commonly discussed is individuals' mindsets. literally the conceptual framework, all right? How they're couching things in their head, the perspectives that they're endorsing and operating from. And where is it working? And where could it be recalibrated? Where could it be tweaked? Where could it be optimized so that our behavior then is in alignment with the mindset, producing more positive results, which are consequently driving more optimal or positive outcomes. Simply put, I'll state it this way. Thoughts impact emotions, which impact behaviors, which drive outcomes. And we explore that relationship among all of those different elements in a coaching conversation, right? A few things that I'm not saying in today's webinar. I'm not saying that training is anachronistic, that it's outdated, that it's old and out of touch, and that group coaching is this kind of new age model that's going to change the world necessarily. Both have their place, as I've stated already. I am not saying that group coaching is better than training or vice versa. Also not guaranteeing that group coaching is going to fit an organization's budget any better, let's say, than something like training. There are a number of variables that come into this decision. So right from the start, I'm not going to kind of sit here today and say, oh, well, you know, group coaching is going to be the best fit for your bank of resources and budget. Not saying that a specific type of learner should always use group coaching instead of training. We'll speak more about this in a moment, but group coaching tends to not be the best fit for, let's say, first-time managers. We often work with group coaching when it comes to demographics such as experienced leaders, and that can look like a variety of levels. What I am saying, group coaching is underutilized at times. I might tweak this just a little to say we are seeing it considered as an option more and more as the months pass. But historically, this is an option that hasn't always been present on the table. So we may go as far as saying that at times it could be underutilized. It works, simply put, and I want to show you in a little bit some of the data that we think validates this claim that group coaching works. Group coaching can be much less expensive per learner. And later on in today's webinar, I'm going to show you a breakdown of just how that works. And both training and group coaching complement each other. In fact, even at Dion Leadership, we've done a bulk of programs where there's a fusion, there's an integration between training workshops, individual coaching, group coaching. They can all complement each other quite beautifully, if you will. Group coaching aligns well with a specific learner audience that is important in today's work world. One of the things that we've seen participants really respond well to is the individualized attention that they receive, whether it be in an individual coaching engagement or group coaching engagement. There's an intimacy to their experience that they really get to explore. And with their peers, they're able to plunge into greater depths. And there's a lot of resonance, there's a lot of enrichment that they're able to glean as a result. Okay. So a minute on how all of this came to be for Dion Leadership. Well, approximately a decade ago, we ran a career development assessment center for a dozen high potential leaders. Okay, these were the best, these were the brightest. Okay, they went through 2 days of simulations, and along with those simulations, they took assessments. And at the end, at the conclusion of the 2 days, they received a written report with insights and development suggestions. And it was great. But then what we noticed is that they were kind of shortly thereafter looking kind of with arms and hands open to say, like, now what? That was great. I've been able to, take away something positive from it, but How do I translate this into consistent, purposeful action? What do I do with the learning? How do I better hold myself accountable or lean into a support system to actually actualize everything I just learned in the last 2 days? And I would even take pause and encourage any of you who have ever attended a workshop to really think about this. Let's say a half day, a full day, 3 days. What's the difference between it being just a great expenditure of time, between that and a great experience that transcends into lasting change? So often we see that a team may take a half a day or a 3-day workshop, and it's a really great experience, but there's something finite about it. There's something static. It ends on the last day. There's no real opportunity for them to then apply the learning consistently and to really kind of suss it out and articulate it and pay careful attention to detail. That's how you create change. That's the fundamental bedrock of real growth and evolution. Group coaching can be a fantastic catalyst for that to take place. Because now the learning doesn't end. Now we're continuing to flesh it out. Okay. So to continue back to the story, I digress. The organization at the time didn't have the budget to put a dozen participants through individual coaching. So we said, let's develop a group coaching program aligned with this specific group, and we can break it up. So we had 3 groups of 4 leaders, right? Again, each is in a pod to really kind of create that intimate experience. After the next assessment center, the group was trained in a peer coaching model. Each pod met 4 times with a group coach, 4 months in a row for 2 hours each time. So cadence and consistency is important here, right? There is a continuum in play that I can't understate the value of. Back to the data for a moment. This resulted, for the people who went through the group coaching model compared to those, the participants who did not, who after the first initial 2 days did not go through any type of group coaching, for those that did, it resulted in a 30% higher promotion rate and retention rates when we doubled back a 1.5 years later. So I think those numbers to some degree kind of speak for themselves. All right. So to just kind of put a little bit of a cherry on top of this sundae of what are the differences between group coaching and training. If I'm talking about training, it's not uncommon that we're focusing on competency. We're focusing on a specific skill set. For example, I may be working with a group and facilitating on, how to better delegate or hold others accountable, or time management, conflict management, things of these nature, but there's an exactness to it. And there's a particular model that's often endorsed. Whereas in group coaching, again, we're gleaning from the participants' already existing experience. We're encouraging them to explore, to sift through the mindset that they're cultivating. Are they operating from a place of curiosity and possibility? Are they thinking about what their value system is like? How that can be a compass for creating a positive mindset? How is the decision that they're making, the behavior that they're committed to, aligning with the aforementioned mindset? And how is their experience informing this? Okay. Content and training, it's not uncommon that it's an org-wide agenda. These could be company-specific competencies. In group coaching, it tends to more often lead towards individual learning goals. If we're talking about audience training, you could have a cross-functional group. You could have a group from all levels coming together. And quite frankly, it's not uncommon that you may be dealing with a less experienced or trained populace. In group coaching, it's not unheard of that people who are working together in that peer group are in the same job family or at the same level, and they've accumulated over time a notable amount of experience. Okay, they don't necessarily have to be kind of these expert leaders, if you will, right? But they've been around a few of those proverbial blocks. And then in training, we may be looking at modalities that involve self-assessment. Maybe they're taking a look at like a DISC assessment that they've taken, and they're processing what that means for their communication style. In a scenario like that, it could be instructor-led, self-paced. Again, we're talking about models, practices, systems, and how we apply them in real-world contexts. In group coaching, you may see something like a 360 assessment, where you're getting data from your peers and your manager and such, but you're bringing your own kind of ambitions, goals, perhaps stressors and motivators to the table. And you offer, a set issue that you're trying to work through to the group, and then you receive coaching on that. And what's great is that you receive it from more than one person, all in service to generating solutions. The overlap, they can be both cohort-based, both involve walking away with an action plan, both often involve manager commitment and involvement, and both involve relationship building. I might argue that the group coaching allows more opportunity for fostering deeper connections in those relationships than sometimes what you may experience in training. When to use training versus group coaching modalities. So if I'm thinking of a situation that I may be faced with the team, what are some things to really kind of like pay close attention to that may help me inform the decision as to whether or not I want to pursue a training model compared to group coaching? Training, individuals that are likely newer to their management role, they need to build new skills, and having a consistent framework in place is helpful to them. They're looking to teach the organization a consistent model or behavior. I've said this now a couple of times. They may, quite frankly, be new to the scene, and as a result, their confidence is a little bit lower. The powers that be may look at their performance thus far and say, hey, they might benefit from practicing a new behavior. Let's put them through this training. We see that a lot in the workshops that we do. I've mentioned things like delegation, accountability, how to administer feedback, how to handle conflict, these types of things, okay? And given if they're new, it doesn't even have to be if they're new, they may be operating from a deficit when it comes to trust. So in that case, all of these together, or any one or combination, we may say training could be the better option. Group coaching. Experienced leaders, they can draw from their past experience, as well as maybe previous training they've done. They may possibly need a refresher. Even if we're talking about mindset shifts, maybe they've grown comfortable. Maybe they're maintaining a certain status quo that is now mediocre at best, and they need a little bit of disruptive balance, so to speak, or just disruption to create new energy, to optimize whatever scenario they find themselves in, okay? They have the ability, desire to learn how to coach others, desire to form strong peer groups within the org. I will make special note to this bullet point. When it comes to selection, this is something to factor into the equation. You want people who are invested, who are open to the process, right? Not everybody's ready to be coached. Simply put, that's just it. I've seen it myself. So really kind of being discerning about who perhaps you select or nominate for this experience matters. They have to be open to the engagement, all right? They have to at least have a desire to fully engage in a group environment. And they look to build well-being, mindfulness, and resilience individually, internally within themselves, but also perhaps they can recognize it as important to the greater good. And their trust in others is high, or they're open to learning how to cultivate more trust in their relationships, and they see group coaching as a vehicle for which they can do that. Okay. All right. We're adult learning theory. If but for a moment, I just want to mention that when we talk about group coaching and training too, quite frankly, it's grounded in adult learning theory. Now, what does that mean exactly? I just, defer your attention to a few of these bullet points. We're talking about self-directed learning. So they are active participants in the process. They are not just receivers of the information, but they have a say in how and what they want to learn. All right. It's a very active, dynamic role in taking ownership over their own learning to optimize their experience. They build on existing knowledge and experience. They're able to have a clear vision or goal of what it is they're looking to pursue. And through coaching, they're able to give that texture, nuance, clarity. Because if a goal is vague, if you can't really see it, it makes it all the more challenging to take specific action, directed action to improve one's situation. Okay. Learning needs to be relevant, applicable, useful, needs to help them solve problems. And that's where even having a group of peers, all of whom have their own experience and seasoning, if you will, can be very informative to the process, especially when it comes to helping people embrace new perspectives, growth-oriented perspectives, rather than anything that's rooted in deficit. Okay. And as I spoke a moment ago, in terms of selection and finding people who are really open to this experience, they are likely motivated by an internal reward. There is some level of ambition. They have, a desire to succeed in some capacity, however they define that for themselves. But they're looking for a more satisfying experience. This is a question I've even seen come up more recently in coaching is, what do you want your experience to be? And that's a big question, but you can even relate that, let's say, to your average work day. How often do you think about, what do I want my experience to be? Not even just the thoughts circulating in my head, but if I were to literally take my head off my body, right? And just indulge me here and just think about how my body is experiencing the day. What feels good? What's exciting? What hits the switch? What makes me feel accomplished when I walk out the door or sign off at the end of the day? These are the things that matter. And in a day and age where, terms such as quiet quitting or the great resignation appear in our global lexicon, well, how we can stay engaged, how we can retain people really kind of matters. So people feeling good about their experience is a part of this process. And I will say it again, group coaching is but one option in which you can begin to accentuate that more. And quite frankly, show people within your organization that you are committed to their well-being, their development, and their growth, that you're invested. Okay, we're going to keep going. When to use individual coaching versus group coaching. Group coaching. Think of at least 4 coachees, okay, roughly speaking. There's likely going to be a desire to build a coaching culture. And by the way, that can be within the team, okay, among the level, or you can continue to widen the aperture. It could be org-wide, okay? Desire to build a strong peer-to-peer network, and it can be very effective at this. Let me add that. There is a commonality among learning goals, and now individuals don't feel like they are alone on an island in their pursuit of said goals. And if we're talking about brass tacks, if resources are, in question, Cost per person may matter. If you are going the group coaching route, it can be more cost friendly. Just can be. Now, individual coaching, perhaps there are more unique jobs or circumstances as it relates to the role for a particular person. Only have one person at the same time. There's an individual focus for leadership development across the organization, but then there may be selection for particular individuals for them to focus on particular agenda items. All right. And it could be, as part of a larger, more robust leadership training program that I will actually show you an example of in a little bit here. And I will add this as a note. I was just in a conversation yesterday with a prospective client where they were talking about building out a leadership development program. And they were talking about, the different workshops that they wanted to set up over the coming months. But then the topic of coaching came up as well. And we were kind of just working it back and forth. And one of the things that enticed them was the idea of individual coaching, because though they had a group of, let's say, 15 to 20 managers that they're looking at, they're like, you know what? We don't need coaching for that many. They had 2 individuals in mind that they said, this person, they really need to kind of focus on, how they delegate. And this person over here, when it comes to their soft skills, they really need to kind of pay more attention to that. Individual coaching became more of a prominent kind of part of the conversation at that point.
Hey, Joe, before we move on, we got 2 questions that probably fit right about here.
Yeah, what do we got?
Answer those, and then we can capture more towards the end of our talk today. But one was, how have you vetted if someone is ready for group coaching based on the criteria that you mentioned earlier? Like, what's practically speaking, when you say, should this person be in a group coaching program? What are the things that you should be thinking about?
Experience level, having that conversation with them about, where their goals lie, where their ambitions lie, what they're looking for, whether it be currently or next step. Proposing the idea of group coaching and seeing, quite frankly, how they respond to it, their level of openness to that level of commitment, and kind of working from there. Those are the initial thoughts that come to mind. And Steve, if you had something that you wanted to add, by all means.
Well, maybe one more thing I'd add to that too, Joe, is thinking about that learner. Do they need skill building? Do they understand kind of the model? Have they ever gone through a full leadership development training class where they're like, this is the best practice behavior. This is how, the steps of giving feedback, the steps of, strategic planning. If they haven't done that, then you may want to start with some training applications. If you say, people have done this, they know it, but we lose our habits. We kind of got bad habits. They probably know how to do those things, but group coaching will kind of bring back out those best practices. So thinking about, I think for me, it's the experience level of the person having gone through training before. And that's a really important element to it.
Indeed.
Second question then is what is the recommended max number of coachees per group coaching?
Well, I'll just work through an example. Let's say you have a group of 12, okay, and they may be going through group coaching as well as a leadership development program. When it actually comes to the peer coaching experience, that will be broken down into, 4. We tend not to go more than 5, and I would say 5 is kind of pushing it. So the sweet spot really is like that 3 or 4. And in some cases, if it can't be avoided, maybe it goes to 5. But really in that peer-to-peer experience, and I know I've used the word intimacy before, keeping that number small matters. Because in a peer coaching session, each person, it does work on some level like a round robin style. You're going to have 20 minutes to kind of talk about your thing. All right. And to really kind of suss that out. So the bigger the group gets, the, even logistically and kind of administratively, you start to run into time crunches and things of that nature. So simply put, I would say roughly 3 to 4, and in rare instances, maybe 5, depending on the circumstances.
And we'll show later a model where we've kind of kicked off a group of 20, but then broke that group of 20 down to learning pods of 4 or 5. Okay, keep going.
So I mentioned data. I wanted to put this on the board. Every year we do a coaching study at Dion Leadership. And in 21, we surveyed 163 of our coaches. And I think these numbers matter. The big one to the left, 73% of the coaches responded and stated that, their overall well-being, their stress, their health, their focus had improved due to leadership coaching. I think that's a notable number to recognize. I look to the right where, when it came to emotional intelligence and self-awareness, again, 73% noted an improvement. They strongly agreed, all right? 25% agreed. That's almost 100%, okay? When we look at our net promoter score, the question was, how likely are you to recommend leadership coaching to others? Came in at a plus 72. We look at these results and say, hey, this is working. Simply put, and as years pass, we're continuing to compile the evidence to show that this isn't an anomaly, this isn't a hiccup. This is consistently showing progress and growth and development and positive outcomes. So setting the foundation, teaching coaching skills in the coaching process. I want to spend a little bit of time to just kind of walk you through how this actually works. So quite frankly, if you were looking to do this within your own organization internally, this is something you could kind of chew on and begin to flesh out. Or if you were to, hire outside, here we are. This is something that we would likely walk through, okay? So I go back to a group of, let's say, 12 participants, okay, who are going to go through a group coaching program. Well, the first stage of their experience is more often cases is going to be, they're going to go through a workshop that familiarizes them with the coaching process, okay? So they begin to get a fundamental grasp of the basic tenets of coaching. And then that opens the door to exploration. Words like presence, trust, vulnerability come into play, but they don't remain static as words. The expectation is that now it's lived out in action. Okay, these are things that they're going to be living and breathing within the peer coaching experience. And the expectation is that these are some of the things that they're going to be looking to cultivate in their other relationships. They're going to learn the importance of accountability to making lasting change, as I've spoken already. Lasting change is pretty difficult to accomplish if you don't have awareness, if you don't have action, if you don't have consistency, and you don't have accountability. Preparation. There's a model we're going to take a look at in a moment of how they can really prepare for a coaching experience, whether they're on the receiving end of coaching or whether they're coaching one of their colleagues. And as I've stated already in this workshop, they already get the opportunity to begin practicing these coaching skills, all right? The practice, the consistency, these are crucial steps in it becoming more of a reflexive action. All right. So if we talk about the Dion leadership coaching process and we get a little bit more into the model, if you will, okay, we're talking about preparing, engaging, and reinforcing. So someone comes into an experience with an agenda, they are prepared, okay? When we talk about engaging, they're examining the situation they're in, they're establishing a goal, they're analyzing their options, and they're coming to a set action plan. And they have their fellow coaches, right? Their peers, if you will, that are helping them navigate this process. And then as they commit to it, whatever the important things that are identified and labeled are continually reinforced, whether they're brought up by the individual or brought into play by their peers, okay? Now, I mentioned the word present or presence, if you will, and I just wanted to spend a moment on this as well, because if we're talking about being present, I think it's important for us to be crystal as to what that means. It's the ability to be fully conscious and create a spontaneous relationship with the coachee. okay? Employing a style that is open, flexible, and confident, and you are not married to your own agenda. You are meeting that individual where they are, okay? This can result in trust and intimacy within that relationship, more authenticity, more vulnerability, which, by the way, can be really helpful when it comes time to work through any potential conflict that can emerge. Eliminates barriers in relationships, can be very disarming, takes the weaponry out of the dialogue, optimizes coaches' performance, optimizes coaches' development and learning, and it takes relationships from that transactional stage to transformational. And when those types of relationships exist in an environment, that excites people, that turns them on, they show up excited, they leave feeling good, they're engaged, their performance goes up holistically, it just better, it's just better. Just to touch on a couple of these, I know there's quite a few bullet points, but if we talk about presence as a coach, we're operating more from a place of empathy and curiosity. We're listening actively. So we're paying attention to nonverbals. We're paying attention to inflection of tone. We're listening for what's not being said. And one of the hardest things I can tell you is the first bullet point on the right. This isn't about generating solutions for the person. You don't go into problem-solving mode. You listen to where they are and try to meet them there. Okay? And by the way, that can be just as applicable to our personal relationships as it can to our professional. Listening for what's actually there and even asking what that person needs. Are you looking for advice? Are you looking to just vent? Do you just want me to listen? Do you want me to help you problem solve? Like, what's the thing? Rather than immediately imparting your agenda for what you think they need. That's not what happens here. I talked about preparation a moment ago, and I want to be very clear that there is a model in play so people know what to expect. So if I'm in that group of 12 and now I'm in my pod of 3 or 4, when I go to sit down in that group coaching session, right, I understand what issue or agenda I'm bringing to the table. I've prepared for it, and I am both economical and succinct in my manner of presenting it. I understand why it's significant, its effect on me, the people around me, products, services, dollars and cents. It can be a range of things. I have some vision of what the ideal outcome looks like, and I can articulate that. I can share with the group any relevant background information that is necessary for them to better understand the situation, while at the same time not getting lost in the story of what's going on. I can speak to what's been done so far, and I can also speak to how the group can help me. Am I looking to build confidence? Am I looking to examine my decision making? Am I looking to kind of sift through what resources are available or what I might need?
Joe, there's another question related to this coaching skills workshop, specifically how long does it take to teach this? And we usually start this coaching program with a half-day coaching workshop where we're teaching this foundation, and we're talking about group coaching, and that somebody's in a program that isn't about training, it's group coaching. So about 4 hours, you could probably narrow it down if you had to set the foundation. Then usually each group coaching session is 2 hours, is 90 minutes or 2 hours in length. Anything more than that, it just gets a little heavy for the people to be as present and participate, as Joe was mentioning earlier.
Yep. Is that the only question, Steve?
That's it.
Boom.
Keep asking questions if you'd like. If you have any other questions, please.
Yes, please, by all means, bring them on. I am going to continue. Oh, I forgot that the little fancy box thing is there. Cool. So coaching do's and don'ts. I'll pull out a couple of these from the list. I had already mentioned actively listening, asking open-ended questions, operating more from a place of curiosity and empathy, and not trying to impart your agenda or offer solutions. And again, we also, look to take judgment out of the equation any weaponization out of the equation when we talk about coaching. More about, hey, what's here? What's driving it? What's the data? What's it trying to tell you? How does that align with what you think is important? Okay, then how does that translate into behavior and decision making? All right. So intended learner audience, we've touched on this briefly, so just a line or two more about it. If we're talking about who's a good fit for this type of experience, they've likely been with the org long enough to know the culture. All right, there's some seasoning there, as I think I stated already. They've accumulated some level of competency and experience in their role. All right, they're not new, quite frankly. They have a solid, at least foundational understanding, a firm grasp of management and leadership skills. Okay, so we're likely going to rule out first-time managers. Trust exists or can be built. And I mentioned this earlier, that participants are open to, the idea that whether, trust already exists, they're still open to the possibility that it can blossom and flourish any more than it already perhaps does. Or that if it's in deficit, they're committed to learning to, from their end, how to grow it. We're 100% responsible for 50% of any relationship that we're in. They look at it and say, okay, trust within my 50%, how can I nurture this and grow it? Okay. And as I spoke to earlier, participants choose to be part of the program. Maybe they're given a little bit more information about it and they're like, yeah, that's exactly what I need. I really want to jump on that opportunity. Intended audience, this is just to kind of check a few more boxes on this particular topic. Questions you can ask yourself, really, if you're considering this at all. Are the participants mid-level or senior? Is this group an intact team? Are they in the same job family? Are they at kind of a similar level or on the same level? And then if we look to the right, I'll pull out a couple. What are the learning objectives that you have for that learning group? Are you looking to reinforce basic management skills? Or a refresher to a past leadership training program? Is there an organizational agenda that you're looking to, endorse? These are important questions to answer as you begin to kind of build this out or consider whether or not it's a good fit for whatever group you're looking at to provide training or coaching or a combination of the two. So I wanted to give you also today kind of a glimpse at what we do, quite frankly, to be very open and transparent. Like when we talk about our model and process, and share some of that with you to just give you, again, a more informed perspective as to what this can look like. So you'll see two categories, if you will. To the left, there's the format. So we can break this up into only group sessions or a combination of group and individual coaching sessions for the selected participants. And then there's, of course, on the other side, focus. So is this something that the org is driving, particularly as it relates to takeaways, learnings, agendas? Or is this something that allows more opportunity for autonomy and it's more individually goal-driven? All right, so to give you a few looks. If it's an only group session driven by the org, this is probably the closest to training. It pushes an org agenda. It can be the least expensive option. If we're looking at group sessions where individuals have a little bit more autonomy and they identify their own goals, this increases bandwidth to put more leaders through the coaching experience, and a value-based replacement for individual coaching at scale. When we move to the bottom row, things get a little bit more robust. So group and individual coaching sessions under an org-wide agenda tend to be very, rich experiences. They blend teaching org-wide content with individual personalized application, and the commitment is completed over time. These engagements tend to be longer. Same with if it's an individually goal-driven combination of group and individual coaching sessions. These types of opportunities tend to align well to intact senior level teams with participants perhaps in different roles. Okay. So this is rather a kind of high level look at this. What I wanted to do is give you a couple of examples of what this can actually look like in play. But Steve, I see you, so I
Pop back up again. Yeah, and I know you're going to go into 1 and A and C in a little bit more depth. We've got 10 minutes left to do that. But there's a question that kind of fits into this kind of model or category is, do you have any best case examples of group coaching among new leaders in a company? So this chart really wasn't necessarily about new leaders in a company, but maybe helping them to learn the culture, solve new hire problems, almost like, companies create more of a mentoring or buddy system when you join a company. And I think that's a great application for this. It wasn't in this list of solution offerings, but actually I think when it's a common learner group, and if the people are experienced leaders, but they're coming in to learn the company and culture and build a network, I personally think this model is a great solution for that. I don't know, Joe, what do you think?
I can speak personally to that question because I coached in a leadership development program that did a combination of both workshop sessions. That's a fun one, along with individual coaching, and it was a tremendous experience for participants involved. I mean, I remember hearing some of the feedback from the graduation ceremony that they talked about it as life-changing. And these were people. Let me be clear. In one instance, the individual I was coaching, they were going to be moving into more of a leadership role. So this was something that wasn't in their bailiwick as much historically. So to echo Steve's sentiment, I think it can certainly be a great fit.
I think it's a great idea. And we do have an individual coaching lane that many of our clients use for a new VP or above is new leader integration coaching. And we one-on-one coaching, work with that person for a long period of time. So if you're a big enough organization that has 4 people starting around the same time and you can align that together, you can make a much more cost-effective program that's almost equally as rich. Yep. And then the last question in that, I know we got to keep moving, is because it kind of probably fits here too, is do you see a difference in the role of stakeholders in group coaching versus individual coaching? So very astute question. In individual coaching, many times a large part of that is there's an executive sponsor, key stakeholder, where you're doing some interviews up front for those that are responsible for the person's success. And also the boss is the executive sponsor that's helping drive, the learning agenda and helping to help the coach and coachee bring that back into the work environment. Yeah. So the question I guess here, Joe, then to answer is, what's the how is a stakeholder involved when it's in a group coaching program? And it is a little bit different between each of these 4 options, whether it's individual or group.
Well, I think that's when you say, Steve, it's a matter of design. Like it can look a little bit differently dependent on need. Like I think about the second example I want to provide. Maybe it's just a good time to go into the examples to try to speak to that.
Yeah, maybe we speak to that and come back around to it, because I think basically the short answer is in the individual sessions only in our designs, we are really incorporating an individual sponsor. There's just not enough money or time in the program to do that, and we don't need to do that. When there's individual coaching with it and there's an individual goal, like I'm bringing my needs to it. So maybe it's 4 plant managers in 4 plants around the world that are all going to go through this together and build a network. Their boss's input is important and is captured in that. So in design, like B and D, for example, we would incorporate an executive sponsor's input, and maybe in A for sure we wouldn't, C maybe not, depending on the budget. Okay, so that gets it to a little more granular level.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to turn on the afterburners here, folks, because there's still a few slides that I think are of value for to look at. So just to give you an example of what this can look like, this is program design A. So this is group sessions only, looking at an org-wide agenda. This is a real life example, by the way. Okay. This particular group went through both a development program that included group coaching. So the curriculum that they pulled from was from our work on the 6 elements of a leadership mindset. And what you'll see is that in week 1, they had the kickoff, they had the introduction. All right, this is where they also got equipped with kind of what we talked about, that half a day of of the coaching fundamentals. And then moving into week 2, they had their workshop on the first tenet of, a leadership mindset, or the first element, which was around growth orientation. Week 3, they worked with their coaching group. Week 4, they go into the second element. Week 5, they go into their coaching group. And the cadence really kind of builds on itself and can create a wonderful kind of enrichment opportunity for them to apply the learning that's taking place in each of the workshops. So they're kind of committing to that learning in real time. And at the end, we even have a graduation ceremony. People get to kind of talk about their takeaways and move from there. Program Design C, I've used the word a couple of times already today, is much more robust. And this gets into some of the nuance that Steve was talking about earlier when we talk about interviewing an executive sponsor. In this kind of program, it's a combination of both a leadership development training, if you will, along with individual coaching, along with group coaching. Simply put, by the end of month 14, they're not the same person. They may not be the same professional. And I mean that in the best of ways. But we're talking about a very personalized experience in that, their coach is meeting with stakeholders, their coach is talking with the executive sponsor, their coach is observing them, they're getting individual coaching, and then they're getting peer coaching on top of it. Again, a robust program, but if we're really in the business of growing people, this is an option that I would say confidently achieves that. Okay. We talk about group coaching works. Just to give you an idea of where we've seen this work, I've mentioned or spoken to the Career Development Center already. We've worked with nurse managers as part of a nurse retention program, senior executive team development, as well as global experienced plant manager development programs. So we've seen this be successful across a broad spectrum of industries and then levels within those industries. Okay. I wanted to give you more data too before we close out the day. If we're talking about, again, why this works, this is taken from people who have gone through group coaching programs. I want to point out the 86%. They walked away saying, I can prioritize the growth and development of my team while still executing intended business objectives. So the numbers consistently tell us that this is a beneficial investment. And I know I'm going to burn through these quotes because there's a couple of things that I want to be mindful of time to get to before we do part ways on the day. Who you select to be the master coach as part of this process matters. Just because someone can consult or because someone can facilitate does not mean that they are a coach for this kind of assignment. So examining the pedigree of the person who's going to be kind of, let's say, facilitating this process, not in the conventional term of a facilitator, matters. You want someone who has the experience that can ensure the team and group will grow and can really kind of be able to let go and the participants take the helm at times. But if the caboose starts to veer off the track, they know how to get everybody back into play and aligned. So just a brief word on who you have as the coach who's part of this peer coaching process is to be, taken into consideration as well. And lastly, I wanted to share you the cost. These are actual numbers. So if you were going to hire Dion to do coaching, I wanted to share with you what the numbers look like. So, our range, if we're talking about an emerging leader, we're talking somewhere around starting at $6,000 per individual. And that goes up. If we're now moving towards the executive level, we're talking approximately $21,000 investment. Well, if we look at the table from earlier, this is per individual. Someone is only going through group coaching sessions, and I think, Steve, you kind of spoke to this a moment ago. It is more cost friendly. It can be a more affordable route or alternative to take that still achieves lasting impact. Okay. In summary, things to think about: a fluid multimodality, could be training, could be coaching, could be a combination of the two. Do a thorough learner needs analysis to determine the leadership maturity of your learners before considering group coaching. We'd spoken to that earlier. Teaching coaching skills can be a really optimal way in terms of creating a program that's both powerful and supports adult learning. And to finish with words from earlier: trust, vulnerability, advanced learning needs are promoted as part of said culture too. Right? I believe, Steve, we have a poll that we've asked everyone to take before we part ways on the day.
Yeah, if we have a quick second to do that, we were interested to see where people were at in terms of how they think this fits their organization, to help us collect information. Like, where do you see group coaching being used in your organization? Like, do you think that this would work for senior leaders, high potentials, experienced, or like, my organization, now that I've seen this, is just not ready for coaching? We're kind of getting a sense of, is group coaching an application? Probably could have added another one given the earlier question about new leader onboarding as well, but probably other places to do. But you can pick all that you think are relevant in where you think this would fit in the organization. And so most folks, as I see the poll coming through, look like they're saying as part of a high potential development program, or my organization's not ready for it. That's number 2. So interesting to see. Super helpful. Well, I want to be mindful of time. Thanks for that. I know we could talk about this for hours. Just in closing, thank you, Joe, for this. We wanted to put the ebook. I guess we can't use the chat. For some reason, the chat feature was disabled today. So look for an email within a day to receive the replay of this video, and that it'll include the ebook you see on the screen here, which is a great tool to use inside your organization for what is group coaching, how to talk about it within your organization, or you can also download it. There's a QR code there as well. And then feel free to, reach out to Joe or anything.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we didn't get to all the questions, if there's still things percolating and you want to just have a conversation and talk this out, by all means, do not hesitate to reach out. This is what I do.
And then last, our next webinar is, and we'll be sending out a note for this, is on the state of talent management in manufacturing. We're going to have a panel discussion. We kind of are done for the rest of the year because December gets kind of crazy, but we're going to do one in January with 3 very large manufacturing organizations. The top talent people have agreed to participate. They'll be from Lear, from Denso, and from Cardone. 3 very different large manufacturing organizations. Looking forward to proctoring a panel on that. And then we also did another ebook in the coaching space, but in a different area. So if you're interested at all in that, it's an individual coaching for retention ebook. So how do you use individual coaching, not group coaching, but specifically for the purposes of retention? So thanks for spending a little bit of your time with us today.
Thanks, everyone. Yes, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
Yes, thank you, Steve, for the opportunity.